Hey, I'm Scott.
I'm Shatay, and we are the Hazes.
And welcome back to the second season of the Love Haze. We are going through a bit of a transition, if will. The first season, we spent a lot of time really talking about healing and wholeness and kind of getting to the best version of ourselves that we can be. And while we understand that may be an ongoing process, also after you get to some level of your healing and your wholeness, there is some work that we have to do. After that, there is being driven into our purpose, and our stories, the things that we go through often kind of help us transition into what our purpose is in life. And so this season, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking to folks that we know who are really out there doing the work, operating in their purpose, and kind of helping us to shift towards that mode and get into what it is that we're supposed to be doing for our communities. So today, we're going to be talking to Shamiah Kerney. Shamaiah is currently employed as the Deputy Director of Performance Management. She's working in the Executive Office of the Mayor for the District of Columbia. In this role, Shamaiah is responsible for evaluating service delivery to the residents and businesses in the District of Columbia, and also assessing equity and budget-making decisions. Shamaiah is also very active in her community. She volunteers with and serves in leadership roles for various organizations, such as the National Forum for Black Public Administrators, 100 Black Women, and Making a Future Defined by Excellence and Thought Incorporated. She's also a very proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and my Soror.
Hey.
Root to the Soror. Thanks so much for joining us today, Shamaiah.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
As Scott said, so happy to have you here. Really excited about this conversation. I love learning about what folks do. You know, we've had meals together, and but not had a chance to really talk deeply about the work that we all do. So this is really exciting for me, a real treat. So I just want to start at the beginning. Like Scott mentioned a little bit about what you do currently, but can you tell us maybe like broadly, what is the work that you do, and how did you get to doing that work?
Sure. I think it's probably easier to start with how did I get here? So certainly I didn't start off wanting to be a public servant. I don't think anybody really does, right? No one really talks about that as a career path when you're in school. But what I found was that I wanted to better understand why government didn't work for people that look like me. I grew up in Compton, California. I moved to Atlanta to attend the Clark Atlanta University. And I lived in East Point when I was in college. And after I left East Point, I moved to Smyrna. And as you can imagine, there's a stark difference between East Point and between Smyrna. And so I wanted to understand what are some of the policies behind the decision-making that happens. Why do communities that are of color predominantly have chicken spots and Chinese food places and nail shops and beauty supplies? And why was it that when I moved to Smyrna, I got a whole mall and a Harrody's and a Target and quality grocery stores? So I really wanted to understand that. And that propelled me to go back to school to Clark Atlanta and get a degree in community and economic development. At the time, I wanted to be a city planner. I thought that if I had a seat at the table, that I could really steer investment in our communities of color. But what I found is that there's kind of a lot more to the story than just having a seat at the table and telling people, wow, I think we need a better grocery store in X community. So I ended up moving into public policy, working at the Government Accountability Office and really trying to shape public policy from that space, working with Congress and making presentations and trying to make sure that we had a more efficient and effective government that worked for all of us. That then led me to the District of Columbia. Certainly the last couple of years or last several years under the last administration was just challenging. So I decided to take my talents to South Beach, if you will, and I left federal government and went to the District of Columbia. And so local government is a lot different than federal government and moves a lot more quickly, but you are also able to see the direct impacts of your public policy making decisions in a way that you don't necessarily see in federal government. So that is the long answer to say that it really, really started with wanting to understand why government didn't seem to work for people that look like us.
I love that. Can you tell me, because I'm not familiar, and we have this conversation all the time about man, we wish there was a Trader Joe's on the South Side or a Sprouts or, any of those options. What does it take for us to get, quality grocery stores, as you said, like in our communities?
So it's a complicated question, but I will try to simplify it to some degree. Really, a lot of development is based on demographics. It's based on earnings, it's based on median income, it's based on what else is in proximity that will drive business to these new businesses that you're seeking. It really matters who comes to the meetings. You will find, and this is one of the challenges that I've always had with government, is that if you ever look at your city's website, most of the meetings that happen are sometime during the day. Well, if you're a working class individual, you can't take the time to go to a 9 a.m. community development meeting and ask questions about the yellow variant sign that was posted in the lot around the corner from your house. And so government doesn't necessarily make it easy for people to have a seat at the table and to be able to pay attention to what's going on. But that's part of the conversation as well, is showing up. By the time the decisions are made or by the time we start to complain, the train has already left the station. There's very little that will happen just because the community is complaining. Now, there might be some modifications that will be made, but I've not seen too many instances where a community development decision has a reversal because the community is upset about it. So it's really sitting down and listening, trying to go to the meetings if you can, but more so paying attention to the websites, looking at the community development plans. If you can't go to meetings, advocating, writing your city council members, letting them know that you have concerns about some of the plans, asking for sit-down meetings if you can, asking for them to make meetings available to you. You shouldn't have to bend to a 9 a.m. meeting. Can you meet with me at 6 p.m. when I get off work or when I'm more available? Or can you make the community meetings accessible? Right now in the COVID environment, there's a little bit more accessibility because we're all working from home, most of us at least, as well as council. So they're making these meetings available online. And so that does increase the opportunity for people to participate in these type of meetings, but you also have to be aware of when they are. So you do have to go to your websites and look at the calendars and see when they're having these kind of meetings. So it's the advocacy piece, it's showing up, being heard, it's the paying attention, looking at the community plans, the comprehensive plans. Most cities have 10, 15, 20-year plans for development that they will post. They also usually have a public comment period for things like that. So getting involved as early on in that process as you can. And it's also just paying attention to the demographics of your neighborhood, because that's really going to drive the development decisions.
And I really think a big part of what made me start having the discussion about having you come on is like being friends with you and being able to, see the type of things that we post on social media, and like being this person who often rants, on social media about, kind of what we aren't doing and what we need to be doing. Having access and understanding that we are at the age where we can run for public office, and we can impact these decisions, and really understanding the inner workings of the fact that public policy drives a lot of these things that we're fussing about, right? And we have to get involved. Like it's not our parents, it's not our aunts and our uncles, like it's folks that are our age who are running for public office. And not only that, like when elected officials are coming around to our churches and making all these promises and that kind of stuff, a part of our work is then I say keeping our foot on their neck, right? But really, it's accountability. It's like going to those meetings and said, you said when you were running that you were going to do this thing. I'm here to make sure that you keep that promise.
Yeah.
Like we wait a lot of times until, that term limit is up and somebody new comes to our church and they make us some new promises. And, we allow these people to come to our churches and come to our community events and come out with the bros or with the sorors for, a photo op. And we put our support behind them and we hold signs and we don't keep our foot on their necks. And it's up to us to make sure that we really help them keep the promises that they make when they come to these events. And not only that, know that they're going to see us, because if they know that they're not going to see us except in church and they just need to give us that spiel, then that's all they're going to do.
I absolutely agree with that, but I will go a little bit deeper than that, which is just, why are we waiting on other people to run, right? We are all probably know someone who would do well in public office. even some people who desire to be in public office, but really just don't know how to get started. And so I think it is also incumbent upon us to invest in those people that we think are really worthwhile to represent us in various capacities within government. So often I hear people talk about, well, we really don't have a choice. And to some degree, that may seem like it's true, right? Because a lot of people that run for office are well funded, have been in the community for some period of time, and they have made a name for themselves. But that doesn't preclude us from doing the same thing. If you think about the rise of Barack Obama and you think about some of his fundraising efforts, right? It really was grassroots. It was $5 here, $5 there. And if we can put $5 on the bottle, we can certainly put $5 on someone who's running for office. And so it's really starting to have those conversations very early on. And it kind of goes back to the comment that I made in the beginning of our conversation, which is when you were in school outside of a civics class, I told you that there was federal, state, and local. Nobody told you about department heads and public works and community development and the school system or the school board. You didn't really hear about those things more than likely until you were an adult or until you were a homeowner, or you had children and you had questions about why your schools didn't rank up or measure up to some other schools in other more affluent communities. And so it's also just, I would say, again, not only running for office, but we really ought to be pushing the conversation about having more intellectual conversation or more education in our schools about how government is made up. You literally do not hear about that in government. I'm sorry, in school.
Right. So a part of what we want to know then, outside of like the education that we have to do, educating ourselves and also making sure that our children have the education and are knowledgeable. What else should we be doing in these areas? I guess even the conversations that we have amongst our friends, right? I think that those things have to open up some as well, and we have to start talking about how we can make the change that we want to see in our communities. What else is it that we should be doing in these moments, just to at least get us started, get us off the starting block, if will?
I think the first thing really is accessing information, right? I mean, the internet has a ton of information, and not that that should be your only source of information, but certainly it's an opportunity to learn and understand more about the dynamics of government. Again, going back to the meetings and making sure that you're cognizant or aware of when those things happen. But among our friends, we also need to challenge each other. I've never had anybody ask me if I've been to a city council meeting or a school board meeting, but I ask that question all the time. And people are often like, they're a little jarred by that. But if you have children, you should want to know who your school board representative is, or you should want to know what the plans are for your school. Rather than the dinner conversation being about how poor of a teacher your child has, the conversation should spin to, well, what are you doing to either make sure that there are better teacher evaluations or that there are higher hiring requirements or things of that nature. Like, what are you doing? What are you actively doing? And I think that we allow too much space for the complaints, but we don't really give life to making people accountable for their own environments, right? And so it is charging our friends, it's having that conversation. Gone are kind of the days of, well, we don't ask, political questions. We don't ask if people voted or who they voted for. Why not? I want to know that you voted, because really, I don't know that I can befriend somebody who doesn't. Even if you don't feel like government works for you, or you feel like we're choosing the lesser of two evils, which is often an argument that I hear a lot. These are still individuals who impact and choose which direction your life can go in. The policy decisions that they make impact every single one of us. So a person that doesn't vote, I can't really rock with you because I don't understand that. And so I think we should be challenging our friends in every space. For every complaint that a friend has, there's a government agency, there's a policy, there's something that impacts that. And so then what are you doing about it?
I think, though, some people, honestly, to your point a moment ago, don't really know, right? Don't know what steps to take, don't know what their rights, I guess, for lack of a better word, are. A little bit could be, we heard a lot about voter depression, in this last cycle. So I think a lot of it is misinformation or just lack of knowledge. And like you said, we don't talk about it. It's not something we're taught about. And most of our families, unless your families or your parents were really kind of political minded or community focused, you don't hear about it. I only heard about, you know, the most popular elections growing up in our house, not anything on a like more community local level. So I think a lot of people honestly just don't know what they're able to do, you know?
No, I think that's fair, because this is stuff that you just kind of learn along the way, right? Like I said, I didn't start off wanting to be a public servant. I was curious enough about feeling that something was wrong that I wanted to understand it. So some of that has to come from curiosity, right? Like we can't expect for information to be given to us. Sometimes we have to have intellectual curiosity and go seek the answers out, even if that's asking a friend. And you might get misinformation, but again, the internet can be an excellent resource, because even if you just Google election information, you're going to probably, the first thing that's going to come up is the Secretary of State's website. Well, you might have to poke around the Secretary of State's website a little bit to get the answer, or to get a more fundamental understanding of whatever your question may be. But it's not going to be given to us. We're literally going to have to seek it out. Everything that I've learned because I was either mad about something or curious enough to figure it out. It hasn't necessarily been because I've had a friend that knew enough information to tell me or instruct me in the right way. Fortunately, if you're my friend, I can usually tell you, where to go, but I'm not always right either. I mean, some things I have to also learn and I have to dig and figure out to help people understand. But I want my friends to understand this, so I'm willing to do that.
I really like what you said about curiosity, following your curiosities, because we talk about what we've been talking about, especially in this series of conversations, is, having a passion for something, having a purpose for something. And for folks who may not feel like they have a passion, they're not necessarily passionate enough to follow it, I think a really good way to go is, like you said, follow your curiosities. Like, let that lead you into something. And just kind of, I think also a lot of people think they have to see the big picture right away. But like, if you just follow your curiosity enough to the next thing, it'll lead you to the next thing and to the next thing. So I really appreciate that thought. But I want to ask you, what's the haze in all of this? Meaning, like, what challenges do you face in doing this work, or what challenges did you face in starting to do this work? What does that look like?
If I'm honest with myself, I always feel like I'm in the haze, because I'm always trying to figure out what is my purpose and if I'm on the right track to fulfilling that. There are times when I feel like maybe I'm not, but then something will happen that will let me know this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think an example of that is making the decision to move from Atlanta after 20 years, living here for 20 plus years, to DC. Was really, really scary, but it felt like the right thing to do. Purpose for me is really like, if I feel good about it, then I know I'm in the right place. I'm also a person of faith. And so I pray a lot for signs and symbols or something that will let me know that this is where I'm supposed to be. And if I don't feel that, then I know that I need to move on. One of my biggest regrets is staying at GAO as long as I did, because I feel like there are parts of my purpose that I didn't fulfill because I was waiting on people to tell me that I was ready to move to the next level, rather than taking a bet on myself, which is kind of what that was when I decided to move to DC. But the purpose, I don't even know how to really put it in words, because it's really, I feel like it's innate and it's something that you feel. It's something that fulfills you and you know it, and that nobody else can really explain it to you. I know that the next step for me is probably at some point running for public office. Like, I'm too passionate about public policy to continue to kind of sit on the sideline. I've prayed about it a lot, because one of the things that I'm most cognizant of is that when you run for office, everybody else in your family kind of runs for office with you. We're not a society that allows for people to kind of just run on what they care about and what they're passionate about and what matters. We're a society that tries to bring people down in order for the other person to win. So it's kind of, I've always felt like it's a little unfair to put my family in that position where any and everything that they've ever done in life, like, when the Freak Thing 96 pictures show up, oh my God. So, but
it's coming.
I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. But neither are the people who do run for office either. They're just able to deal with whatever their challenges are. Some make it unscathed and some don't. But sometimes we as Black people are not as forgiving, right? And we talk a lot about, kind of why we feel like Barack Obama made it to the presidency, because he was, damn near perfect, right? We've all had that conversation or heard that in passing. And so I don't pretend to be. And so I have to decide for myself whether I'm willing to have that level of vulnerability to run for office and kind of allow the sticks and stones that come along with that. But if I am true to my purpose, then I know that's what's next.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I really think that ties into a lot about the things that we were talking about our internal healing, even in the first season, right? Because some of us can get stuck and get stagnant and like feeling like we're not worthy because of what we've been through or some of the mistakes that we've done. And I think it's really just a continuum, like it's a natural flow into your next level. It's like this understanding that you still have purpose. You still have work that you're supposed to be doing. There is more that is required of you after you get your healing. And it can't be that we allow like exposure of what has been for us in the past to keep us from what our destiny is. And that's on every single level of life. And so for me, it just highlighted like this continuum that's what it is, right? So when I get to my career and what my purpose work is, I have to know that what I went through in that season is pushing me into this work as well.
Yeah.
That also, go ahead.
Oh no, I was saying, absolutely. I think, everything that we go through is preparation for whatever is next. And I think that if you really believe that, then you won't allow that fear to keep you from pursuing what's next. And I say that as I'm talking to myself at the same time as I'm saying it to you, because really I said I was going to run for office probably 10 years ago. And then I decided, I'm not ready. People probably think I'm too young. They're going to think I'm not experienced enough. But I am inspired by some of these young 20-somethings that I've seen that are already serving in city council, straight out of college or straight out of graduate school, who understand their purpose enough that they didn't allow the convictions of others to keep them from fulfilling their purpose.
Right.
And so, it's a level for all of us. I'm not there just yet, but I'm a work in progress, and I'll get there.
Well, we all are.
Yep, we're rooting for you too.
Yes, Lord. So far, how has the work impacted your life just up to this point?
It's been challenging because I'm in certain spaces. Sometimes I'm the only person of color, the only Black woman. And so those conversations can be challenging, but my superpower is speaking truth to power. So I don't fear having those kind of conversations with people who generally are not ready for that. But there have certainly been doors that have been closed to me throughout my career because of my willingness to speak truth to power and make people uncomfortable. And so it's been challenging in that way, because sometimes I literally remember this was a real prayer. I asked the Lord one time, why did you make me like this? Why did you make me like this? I want to get along, go along to get along like other people. I want to go through life and not be impacted and feel like I have the weight of the Black community on my shoulders. I want to skip through life like some other people who act like they don't give a damn what happens to people that look like us. So I prayed that, like, why did you make me like this? I don't have an answer for that. But what I do know is that, again, because my superpower is speaking truth to power, there's a reason why I've been able to be in the positions that I've been in and have a seat at the table in places where sometimes people that look like us don't have. And so because of that, the challenge is also a little bit of a burden, because it does sometimes feel like I have the weight of the Black community on my shoulders. It does sometimes feel like I have to really modify my facial expressions or the way I speak, because I understand that people are going to make generalizations about other Black people and other Black women based on their interactions with me, because they're not likely to have many other interactions with other Black people outside of a professional capacity. Yeah. And so some of that it's been a blessing and a curse. It's been a blessing to be at the table. It's been a burden to feel like I have to always represent us. I'm happy to do it, but it does feel challenging sometimes. And sometimes it's painful especially if I feel like I haven't represented us in the right way, or that someone has walked away from an interaction with me making generalizations about us as a community that I think are unfair.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, because it brings a realness to it, whereas, people might think of their purpose and it also kind of we talk a lot about both and, right? Like two things can coexist, two
Right.
opposing thoughts or feelings can coexist, and we have space for all of it. So to hear you say, like, you know, you're on the right path when you feel it, you have a peace about where you are, you just know that that's where you're supposed to be. But also in the midst of that, there are still challenges that you face, and there is still a heaviness to it. I think it's important for people to hear that, you know, when you're doing your work, it's not all, you know, sunshine and roses, that, you know, you're still met with things that might feel like opposition, but at the end of the day, it is, you know, developing you in some way. It is all something that you could use. It is something that someone else is watching and is being inspired by. So I appreciate you saying, like, you know, this is great, but also the haze is not stopped. With that, do you feel like everybody has a purpose? And like, how does someone know? We talked a little bit about earlier following those curiosities, but what are your thoughts, you know, otherwise?
Everybody has a purpose. It is just a decision point about whether you're going to follow it or not. And I don't know that everybody taps into their decision point. Life doesn't happen to you. You make life happen. Yep. And so for the people who kind of are of the mindset that life happens to them, then more than likely they're not following their purpose, because you won't feel like that when you know that you are fulfilling your purpose. You will know that you are making life happen because you are making your purpose happen. Yes, and so while I don't know what the signs are other than really kind of an innate fulfillment. You know, sometimes for me, it comes in dreams. Sometimes I remember telling my mother as a child, like, you know, certain dreams, and she would look at me kind of weird, but I will have these deja vu moments where I will remember experiencing myself in a certain scenario before. And that is like a sign to me that I'm exactly where I should be. Nice. And I don't subscribe to, you know, a whole bunch of, you know, kind of craziness, but I do feel like there are things that come to you in dreams and that God will send you signs, particularly when you are most vulnerable and most at risk of going off track from your purpose. I believe God will send you a sign and bring it to you and let you know that you're where you are supposed to be. Even in moments of discomfort, it's still where you're supposed to be.
That's all right there. I'll take that. And it's actively preaching to me about some stuff that I know that I have to do and that I'm supposed to do. And I'm trying to don't do too much.
Yes, grab hair. Yes.
I think for me, when I take this small step that I know I should have taken a long time ago, I give myself a little padding around that thing and just be like, I'm doing enough, right? But those conversations be like, look, you know, you need to be doing more than this. You know, there's other work for you to be doing. You need to come on through. That's so difficult, man, just because, you know, you shift into a new space, you kind of plant yourself in that new soil, and then you're growing there. And then there's this nudging that, okay, then there's something else for you to be doing. And I still like, let me get comfortable over here right now before you push me into something else. What are you talking about, guys?
Absolutely.
So those things are difficult. Yeah.
Very difficult. But just what I try to also think about a lot too is, you know, who is waiting on me to do what I'm supposed to be doing? And when you think about that, like that is also a heaviness, right? That there may be somebody who's not manifesting or going where they're supposed to go because I'm too busy, you know, being stuck in my comfort.
Who waiting on you, Scott Hayes?
I'm about to hang up.
You just preached the whole word.
I have time for this today.
I felt that over here. That's good. That's good stuff.
Y'all waiting on you, Scott.
Y'all my business. Y'all gonna get out my business.
Listen, look, that might have been why today was my day, so you can hear this word that I didn't even know you needed.
All right. So, what's the biggest piece of advice that you have for other people, other than what you just gave me? For them other people, not me this time.
Ooh, it's hard to follow that one. Biggest piece of advice is really to be true to yourself. You know, pretending to be something that you're not or somebody that you're not doesn't help you fulfill your purpose either, right? Because if you're trying to be something that you're not, that can't be your purpose. And I think I spent a lot of years, especially the earlier part of my career, trying to dim my light and be quiet, because I was so happy to have a seat at the table. I was happy to be involved. Who would have thought this little girl from Compton would be in the halls of Congress presenting information to congressmen and their staffers, right? And so I felt like I should be grateful for that in some way, as opposed to I earned this right. I earned this position. And when you feel like you earn it, it gives you a different level of confidence. And so you're not waiting on somebody else, again, to kind of crown you and tell you when you're ready. So being true to myself has also, and for other people, being true to yourself, I think really opens doors and provides opportunities to others that maybe you didn't even think of. And that true to yourself allows you to be able to sleep at night. It gives you a peace and a comfort. Even again, you can be uncomfortable with being yourself, but it does still provide you a comfort that you are being true to, to innately who you are. And that's extremely important. I don't know how you go through life, the remainder of life, because I think we all, kind of wear a mask at some point, but there's some point where we unmask and we start to really be true to who we are. And when you get to that point, it's really a great thing. And so that's probably my biggest word, is really be true to yourself as soon as you can. Yes.
What I keep hearing from you, just in my own words and my interpretation of what you're saying, is like, seek peace and pursue it. Like that you said a couple of times that you kind of had a peace, you've had a knowing. So even though that you are facing challenges, there is still an underlying peace about, one, who you're showing up as, who you're being, and then also like the work that you're doing, that you're on the right track, that you have like this underlying peace, regardless of whether or not it gets rocky, that the peace is still there. So that's definitely, I think, something worth noting for folks. Like, you just kind of, when people say, when you know, that's kind of what I'm, hearing from you. So then how can we help? Either the work that you're doing, or I definitely feel like I have marching orders for work that we can be doing in our own community. But, how can we help?
So one of the things is really to hold your circles accountable. So asking the questions and making sure that we are civically engaged. And civic engagement doesn't mean just voting for the president. Civic engagement means, and not just voting for the governor because it's on the news that, Georgia might turn blue, or wherever state that you might reside. But it's also paying attention to your city council, paying attention to your school board representatives, paying attention to who's getting appointed to certain positions. All of that is very important information to know, so that you can engage in the right way and you know who to go to when you do have problems. Help will probably also come in the form of encouragement, so that I actually do run for office.
Got it.
Done.
And also just, I think, continuing to share information that is solid. I think, Shatay, you mentioned earlier that there's a lot of misinformation that's out there, and I totally agree with that. And so when we know that things are incorrect, we need to just call that out. Sometimes those can be some challenging conversations with people who are very kind of, stubborn, or very, they stand fast in what they believe and what they think they know and understand. But if we know better, we should do better. And so we need to challenge people about spreading misinformation and making sure that we provide or counteract with factual information for people and giving them sources to do so. You don't have to believe me, go to X, give them a resource if you have to, so that people understand that you're not just kind of telling them whatever you think, but that it's rooted in, sound resource.
Good stuff.
That's really good. All right, consider it done. Call people out, tell them to vote, support your campaign.
Hold
I can pay $5 on it right now on Cash App.
I got you. You make sure you got the right size shirts for all your supporters, so I can pound this pavement. You hear
me? Listen. As a person of size, trust and believe, I've had way too many shirts I just have to put over my shoulder. Like, okay, thank you. So I got you.
Real spill. Shatay and I are very much music fanatics. So we always have a music for this moment segment. So we want to ask you, we want to give our guests the opportunity to tell us like your work this moment, this movement for you? What does it feel like? What song does it remind you of? Share with us.
Ooh, that's a good one. I Every Day I'm Hustling is probably like the one that comes to mind the most. Like, it probably should be something like way deeper than that, but it's really not. Like, I'm kind of a borderline trap music queen a little bit. Like, that's how I get excited. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There are a lot of songs that speak to the soul, but I think almost anything Kirk Franklin, like first album Kirk Franklin and the Family, like all of that just puts me in the place. I'm just like, yes, Lord, like I'm listening, I'm paying attention. Let me touch you and see if you real. Conquerors, like songs like that just speak to my spirit, and it keeps me encouraged in a way that sometimes you need, again, when you're the only person of color, the only Black woman, the whatever in the room. Sometimes you have to build a inner strength that people don't really understand. And so that's kind of what helps me keep moving forward.
I think even your first song kind of speaks to, and it normalizes so much of who we all are, right? We from church to the trap, right? But this is our work, right? It doesn't have to be that we're this one thing and that's it. Because I'm gonna listen to any range of things when I'm headed out to do this purpose work. And they get me hyped up for the moment. Like sometimes I need Jesus, but they also need to know I bust a head, right? And so I think that's real. I really appreciate that about our whole conversation, right? Because we regular people who are out here, moving, and we shaking our boots on the ground, and we making sure this thing happens. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, I think the last one I'll mention is Black Woman, right? Angie Stone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot, like before I walk in certain meetings in the room, especially when I have to give presentations or I have to have a conversation with people that I really need to try to persuade them in some way, just to build my confidence. Like, I'm not short on confidence, but certainly there are times when you don't feel it, and you don't feel like it exudes. And so sometimes I have to listen to that just to ground myself and just remembering just how strong I am as a Black woman, that I stand on the shoulders of my mother, my grandparents, ancestors, whoever I have to kind of channel that energy from, because this is so much bigger than me. There's life after Shamiah, Tanisha, Danae, Woods, Kearney, right? And so, yes, y'all need to know. Y'all need to know who I am now. But there's so much life. There's life after that. And, my real purpose is for it to be better than it was when I got here. And I really, really hold on to that.
Can we just pause for that? Mm-hmm. That word is so real. That is literally what we pray all the time. It's just like, not only that we're evolving to our highest selves, but like whatever space we enter, whatever relationships we have, wherever we are leaving that space better off than it was.
That's a whole word.
Anything else?
I don't think so. I got to go and just get in my prayer closet. Still feeling the way about y'all in this call it out.
It was a word for you and me and anybody else who's listening, or who watches this. There's a lot of work to be done. We all have an individual role in fulfilling it. And the longer that we take to do that, the longer that it's going to take for us collectively to reach our next level. So let's do it.
Let's do it.
Good stuff.
Well, thank you, Shamaiah, so much for your time. We appreciate you. This conversation has been really inspiring. I feel like I've learned more about you and excited about the work that you're doing. I've learned something myself about, checking for community meetings and understanding what the plans are for my city, even though we don't have kids yet, but just kind of understanding this community and what part we play, and not just focus on, statewide or federal-wide kind of initiatives and policies, but really kind of looking into what's going on at our local level, and just appreciate all of your thoughts about, trusting your gut, affirming your work, and then just doing the work for the person who is to come after you, like the person that's waiting for you. So I appreciate just all of those nuggets were really just beautiful. It was beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely. We thank you again for joining us on the Love Haze. Shamiah, it's been a pleasure to have you. this is a wrap for this episode. Nothing more to say. Just this is us. This is Shamiah Kearney. And until next time, the Love Haze. We appreciate you and we encourage you to pull up to your purpose.
Pull up.
Peace, y'all.
Bye.
Why did it take so long to come to me? Oh, baby. And